So we are looking at number 16 on our Unit 1 test review, and we have 3 squared minus 6 squared, all of that over negative 4 cubed minus the absolute value of negative 7. So I'm going to start with the top, and we're just going to simplify those exponents. So 3 squared is 9 minus 6 squared, which is 36. And I'm writing over here just so I have a little bit more space. All of that over, let's do our, we can do one of two things. You can do the grouping symbol or the exponent. Let's do the grouping symbol, the absolute value. So this says negative 4 cubed minus the absolute value of negative 7. Well, the absolute value of negative 7 is just 7. So notice we kept that minus in front of it. The minuses don't cancel out. We can't do that. It's not like that. You just keep minus negative 7. Okay? So we have minus negative 7 here. And let's go ahead and simplify the top. 9 minus 36. I'm going to put that in my calculator just so I don't make a small mistake. 9 minus 36. And we get negative 27 over, let's do our exponent, negative 4 cubed. So remember, when you're doing an exponent and you have a negative, you need to put it in parentheses. And to make something cubed, I hit the caret and hit 3. If I want to go back down, I just hit the right arrow. Let's hit enter. And we get negative 64 minus 7. We can simplify negative 64 minus 7. We have negative 64 minus 7, and that should give me negative 71. So I have negative 27 over negative 71. Let's see if we can simplify this. So negative 27, oopsies, not 227. So you can actually scroll back and type over that. Negative 27, and not minus, divided by negative 71. And it gives us that weird decimal. I'm going to show you something that we can do with our, can't speak right now. So let's take this decimal and we're going to hit math. And notice how number 1 says frac. That means we're going to turn it into a fraction. Hit enter. So now we have our answer is turning to a fraction. Hit enter. And 27 over 71 is as simplified as it gets. So that's our final answer. Positive 27 over 71. All right, let's move on to our next example. So we're looking at number 17 now. I'm going to get rid of all this. And 17 has a bunch of stuff going on. First thing I see are these parentheses, and then within the parentheses there is a cube root. That's a grouping symbol, so we need to do that first. Remember I told you to check if a cube root comes out to an integer in your calculator. So let's do that. We're taking the cube root, so math 4, the cube root of 27, and that is 3. Hopefully we'll memorize that, but if you don't, just use your calculator. So we have 4 plus 3 quantity squared. 8 is in the front, and then we're subtracting 10. So all we did was simplify that cube root. Now we're going to simplify the rest inside the parentheses. 4 plus 3 is 7 squared minus 10, 8 in the front. Now we need to do our exponent, 7 squared. That's 49. This is 8 times 49 minus 10. I definitely don't know what 8 times 49 off the top of my head is, so let's use our calculator. 8 times 49, and you get 392. Minus 10 for a final answer of 382. And of course, I always say check in your calculator just to make sure. You don't want to make a simple mathematical error like that. 382. Excellent. All right, let's move on. So now we're going to evaluate for replacement values. Number 18. So A is 64, B is negative 3, and C is 1/4. So wherever I see those values, those letters, I'm going to plug in those values. We have negative 2, the cube root of 64, minus 2 times negative 3 squared. let's do our grouping symbols first. And remember, cube roots and square roots are grouping symbols. So let's find the cube root of 64. If you don't have it memorized, try your calculator. Cube root is math 4, 64, not 30, sorry, 64. And you get 4. Awesome. So we have negative 2 times 4 minus 2 times negative 3 squared is just positive 9. We have multiplication or subtraction. Let's multiply. So we have negative 8 minus 2 times 9 is 18. Negative 8 minus 18 is negative 8 plus negative 18. That should give us negative 26. Let's still check in the calculator just in case. Negative 8 minus 18. Negative 26. Perfect. Let's try the next one. We have 16 times 1/4 squared minus 5 times 64 plus negative 3. All right, 1/4 squared. So I'm going to write this off to the side. You can do 1/4 squared one of two ways. You can say that 1/4 squared is just 1 squared over 4 squared. And then we'll simplify that. 1 squared is 1, and 4 squared is 16. So we have 16 times 1 over 16. And then everything else, let's keep everything else the same. All right, let's look back at this 1/4 squared, okay? If this way totally confused you, then let's get our calculator out. I don't really like to rely on the calculator, but in this case, it could really help us. So if we want 1/4 squared, we're going to put 1/4 in parentheses, and let's square it. Let's see what we get. We get a decimal. Now you could use a decimal, that's fine, but I also want you to see how you can make that decimal a fraction. So while you have this decimal, click Math. Remember that number 1 to frac? We're going to do that. Enter, enter. And that tells us that 1/4 squared is going to be 1/16. Now we need to multiply 1/16 times 16. We can do that in our calculator right there, and that's going to be 1. So we have 1 minus, let's do 5 times 64, which is 320, plus the negative 3. I'm just going to write that as minus 3. And then we can plug that whole thing in the calculator. 1 minus 320 minus 3 equals negative 322. Final answer. Now we've got a fraction for this next one. So for number 20. So remember we said b, so we have 2 times negative 3 minus negative 3 squared. Notice the parentheses, over 32 times 1/4. All right, let's start with that exponent. So we have 2 times negative 3 minus negative 3 squared is just 9. Remember that when you're putting that in the calculator, you need to put it with those parentheses, otherwise it would give you negative 9. Then we have 32 times 1/4. In the top, let's go ahead and multiply 2 times negative 3, and you get negative 6 minus 9 over, let's do 32 times 1/4. You can do it by hand and just do 32 times 1/4, put that over a 1, and it's just 32 times 1 is 32, 1 times 4 is 4, and that's 8. If you would rather use your calculator, we can type it exactly like it's written, 32 times parentheses 1 divided by 4. Make sure you close that parentheses, and you get 8, and that's what we got the first way. So we have negative 6 minus 9 over 8. Negative 6 minus 9, well, what's that? That's negative 15 divided by 8. You could leave your answer just like this, or if you want to get a decimal, it's going to be kind of a weird decimal, but we have negative 15 divided by 8. It gives us negative 1.875. So I would say that or this is the best answer. Let's see if they told us how to round it. They didn't say anything about rounding, so you could put either of those as your answer. Last one in this section is 21, and we have the absolute value of 8 times 1/4 minus 6 times -3. So within our absolute value, we have to do 8 times 1/4. This is the same as 8 divided by 4, which is just 2. Absolute value of 2 minus 6 times -3. The absolute value of 2 is just, I'm going to write up here now, positive 2 minus minus 6 times -3. And we have 2 minus 6 times -3 is -18. 2 minus a negative is plus, for a final answer of 20. All right, now we're on to simplifying radicals, almost at the end. So in this case, you need to be very careful of, look to see if you are adding, subtracting, or multiplying, right? Because if we're adding or subtracting, we have to have like terms, or specifically, we have to have like radicands. Radicand. So radicand, remember, is the number underneath the radical symbol. So if one of them has square root 2, the other one has to have the square root of 2 in order to actually add them. If one has square root of 2 and the other one has the square root of 5 when we simplify them, then we can't combine them and they just stay as two separate terms. So for our first one, we have 2 root 32 plus 5 root 2. Root 2 cannot be simplified any further, so I'm just going to hang on to that guy. And let's go ahead and simplify 2 root 32. I'm going to write it over here and use a little bit more space. I'm going to be running into these other boxes. So let's do that upside down division, 32. We could divide that by 2, and we get 16. Divide by 2 again, get 8. Okay, don't forget, we started with a 2 in front, so that comes down. We're looking for groups of 2, so there's one. There's another one. And then there's one little 2 left over. So we've got 2 times 2 times 2, 8 root 2. So what we're really looking at is instead of 2 root 32, we have 8 root 2 plus 5 root 2. Our answer is going to be something root 2, and all we have to do now is combine the 8 plus 5, leaving us with 13 root 2. Okay, let's move on to 27. This is a cube root problem, so we're looking for groups of 3. 4 root 32. Let's see if we can break this down a little bit. Get this out of the way. All right, so when I do upside down division of 32, well, we just did that, right? So 32, 2, 16, 2, 8. I probably shouldn't have erased this, so you could just look at it again. Sorry about that. All right, this time we want groups of 3, though. Remember, there's a 4 to start with. Okay. And then there's 3 2s there. And then there's only 2 more 2s. So those actually just stay under here. 2 times 2. So when we simplify this, we have 8 cube root of 4. That's our first one. All right, now let's simplify the square root of 250, the cube root of 256. 256, that's divisible by 2. I'm definitely going to check my calculator for this one.